Hello, friends. I'm George Stamus, the president of the board of directors of the Hellenic Initiative. And on behalf of that board and all of our staff and thousands of supporters from around the globe who support our work, we would like to thank all of you very much for making this special event possible today. I hope you all know by now and understand the mission of the Hellenic Initiative. It is a simple one. We formed THI in the depths of Greece's deep recession of 2010. We formed THI to give the diaspora an organized way to participate in the revival of Greece. Which brings us to today's extraordinary panel of speakers and the extraordinary and most important subject, the opening of Greece. Leaders like today's panelists are precisely why we are so encouraged by the opportunity for Greece to rebloom itself. And so today we have a distinguished Nobel Prize winner, Sir Christopher Pissarides. We have the chief economic advisor to the Prime Minister, Mr. Alex Patelis. And I might say about the Prime Minister, his leadership, as helped so ably by Alex, has meant so much to the opportunity of the diaspora and the mission of the Hellenic Initiative to help support this revival. And of course, we have our great friend, advisor, and one of Greece's and Greek Americans' great financial experts, Dimitri Athanasopoulos of AXIA Ventures. AXIA has been a founder, part of the founding group of the Hellenic Initiative. They've been with us from day one. And without their support, I'm not so sure where we would be today. So thank you so much, Dimitri, and to all of our panelists. And finally, of course, today's moderator, no stranger to the Hellenic Initiative, Marianna Skylakaki. She's giving her time and attention once again and all of her talents. So Marianna, over to you, and thank you very much on behalf of all of us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stamus, for this kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Marianna Skylakaki, editor-in-chief of AXIA, and I will be moderating today's exciting discussion, which is part of the THI Digital Speaker Series, entitled The New Greece, Open for Foreign Investment. As Mr. Stamus said, to discuss this important topic at this critical crossroads for Greece, I have the honor of welcoming Sir Christopher Pissarides, Nobel laureate and Regius Professor of Economics at my alma mater, the London School of Economics. Welcome, Sir Christopher. Mr. Alex Patelis, Chief Economic Advisor to Greece's Prime Minister, who has over 3 decades of experience as an economist, analyst, and strategist, working in a variety of positions in New York, London, and Athens. I noticed that Mr. Patelis began his career at Goldman Sachs, which is also where I started out a little more than a decade ago. Welcome, Mr. Patelis. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Dimitrios Athanasopoulos, founding partner, group managing director, and member of the executive committee of AXIA Ventures Group, with more than 20 years of experience in the finance industry. So once again, welcome to all of our esteemed speakers. It is such a pleasure to have you with us to share your valuable insights with the audience of the Hellenic Initiative. It seems very natural to be talking about Greece as a country that is open to foreign investment today, which is actually very much in contrast to the perception of the country just a few years back. I remember back from my investment banking days that Greece was considered virtually uninvestable. Such was the sovereign risk that was associated with it. Now, today, the picture that is emerging is quite different. So before we dive into the questions portion of this event, I'd very much like to get your opening views on this topic and on this interesting and rather hopeful transition. Sir Christopher, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you very much, Marianna and Mr. Stamus and the Hellenic Initiative for the incredible work that you're doing, but also organizing this event and giving me a chance to talk. It's lovely to be with you, and it's great to hear my name being pronounced correctly in an English-speaking session. It doesn't happen very often over here. And I'm speaking both as a Greek. I mean, I consider myself sharing time between Cyprus and London, because I also have a European studies at the University of Cyprus. But of course, over the last year, I spent time, unfortunately, not going to Athens because of the pandemic, but at least thinking about Greece. So I'm looking at Greece both from the inside, as it were, but also from the outside as part of the diaspora. And what I see really here is a country with enormous potential. I mean, it's got natural resources, a lot of them. It doesn't make very good use of them now, but they're there. It's got excellent human capital. Again, it doesn't make as good use of it because a lot of it is migrating, young people. It's part of the biggest market in the world, the European Union market. Many people say, oh, you know, the United States and China are the biggest markets, but in fact, I think the EU is actually a little bigger than either. It's just that it's not treated as a single market very often. And of course, you know, it's got cultural heritage that I don't need to tell you about. You see a very good example behind me. Yet, despite all that, its record in even with Europe is down at the bottom. And one might ask, what can we do to reverse that? Now, both my view about these things and also when we got down to writing the report on the development of Greece is not to go back and say, you know, why is it like that? Who is responsible? Who is guilty? Who is not? But look forward and say it shouldn't be there. You know, that's not where Greece belongs. So what can we do to bring it above that level? You know, where it needs to be sitting. Which, in my view, there is no reason why it shouldn't be where the successful small countries of Northern Europe are. You know, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden. They're all comparable size to Greece. Now, when you look at that and why it's there, then you go back and think, you know, at least thinking as an economist now more than anything, is that why do countries fail? Why do they fail to provide a sufficiently high standard of living that you somehow feel they deserve, or growth? And one of the primary reasons is politics. Unless you get the political environment right, the economic environment doesn't have much of a chance. If you have any doubts, just look at North and South Korea. They're all Koreans. They were the same in 1952, and look at them now. Now, of course, Greece is not North Korea. It's not South Korea either, but especially North Korea. And so if we're here where we are now, you might ask, well, is there anything different now? You know, does the political environment enable us to talk with more optimism about the future? And if the answer to that was no, I wouldn't have devoted so much time to writing our 260, whatever, 300-page report. You know, things have changed on the political scene. I mean, I have to say, even the Tsipras government ended better than it has started, but not quite there. The big change happened with the government that is now, you know, with the Mitsotakis government, which, I mean, I'm not talking about politics. I'm just like everyone else when it comes to politics, but when it comes to economics, I see a government prepared to accept political reform, to provide the right framework for investment to flourish, for human capital to flourish. And that's how we got into the reform, and that's why I feel optimistic that things could happen. Now, having provided that environment, of course, the political environment alone cannot do miracles. It's the enabling circumstances that it gives you. It gives you the enabling environment so that economics can flourish. So what does it need, as it were, on the economy? And the answer, when we sat down to prepare our report and we're thinking about it, is that it needs reform just about everywhere, in every aspect of the economy. It needs reform on education, schooling from very young age, onto higher education. It needs to engage more women in the labor force, more young people. it needs to improve the infrastructure, it needs to bring new technology, it needs to improve government service. It's a whole package that it needs, which interacts. There are complementarities, if I can put it like that. One reinforces the other when reforms are taking place together. So we cannot really say, here is one thing that needs to be done to help everything else. Everything needs to go together. Now, what you could ask though is if I were to name not the reason, because the reason we're not quite there, we're not up there and we're here, is that it has to do with everything that I mentioned, the education and the way the labor market is organized and so on, and the investment environment. In terms of outcomes, as an economist, when you look at this economy, where does it fail? And the answer is that it fails in providing a highly productive labor force. It's the productivity of the labor force. That it's key if you want to succeed within the big European market. You need to be productive. Mm-hmm. With low productivity, you cannot support high incomes, and therefore there aren't many savings. Therefore, you don't get the domestic investment. If you don't get the domestic investment, you don't get the new technology. The government doesn't have a big enough revenue to invest in infrastructure. And therefore, you get into this vicious circle that you have low productivity, you have no investment, you have no infrastructure, and therefore you are stuck with low productivity. So how do you break this vicious circle so that you can get productivity instead of circling around at the bottom, get it to move up? And the answer there is that you need a strong labor force combined with strong investment in the infrastructure and the capital equipment of the country. Now, the strong human capital needs education reform is there. I know you're smiling and look at me in a way, why don't you finish?
No, I just let's leave things for the portions part of the event. That's the only reason.
I'm not going to answer your questions before you ask them.
Okay.
And once we have the human capital and we need investment. We need investment because it's going to bring the new technology and all that. Mm-hmm. Which brings me to today's meeting. So I stop.
No, it was a wonderful opening statement that set the stage, I think, for the rest of the discussion, and hopefully it will be a very forward-looking discussion that we're going to have today. Yeah. Thank you, Sir Christopher. Mr. Patelis, would you like to go next with your opening statement?
Of course. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Thank you so much for the very kind invitation. Hello to Mr. Stamos and hello to Mr. Skylakaki. And it's a great honor to be here with THI and to everybody who's tuning in. My name is Alex Patelis. I'm the Chief Economic Advisor to the Prime Minister. I'm going to start by mentioning that neither Mr. Pissarides nor myself are politicians, and yet we have been somehow involved in the Greek government, consulting, as is the case for Mr. Pissarides or Professor Pissarides or myself working directly. And that in itself tells you a lot about what's changed. There is a government in place now that believes in quote unquote experts, something that was very much derided for a long period of time, and believes that, and the Prime Minister believes that everybody can contribute according to their skills and according to what they have to offer, and that you need to attract the best if you want to get things going. And so that would be sort of my opening statement, but I would also add to that, it doesn't just go to people, it's also with ideas. So what has happened here is that the Prime Minister tasked a committee headed by Professor Pissarides to draft a growth plan for Greece, and this was submitted and was taken into account and used in public policy. I should also add that the Prime Minister spent a lot of time as a leader of the opposition preparing for time in office, preparing the bills and the changes that need to be made, and therefore was able to start implementing them very quickly. This government now is nearly 2 years old and has voted through Parliament 187 bills despite the pandemic. and despite all the difficulties that came with it, the energy and the force of the government continued unabated, 178 bills with a lot of structural changes, many dealing with the points that Professor Pissarides mentioned. To your right, top right or top left of my head, you can see Greece 2.0. That's our recovery and resilience plan that we have put together to take advantage of the 32 billion that has been allocated to Greece from the European Union's Next-Gen EU project. That also has been put in place with economic fundamentals, based on economic fundamentals. Greece 2.0 is the future of Greece, the better version of Greece that we are building. And I look very much forward to the rest of the discussion and to zooming in and talking and drilling down to some particular issues. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patelis. And I think, especially because a lot of the people watching us probably don't live in Greece, the fact that over the past few years we have this combination of experts and politicians working on these issues is truly innovative for the country. It's not something that has happened often before. So the floor is yours, Mr. Athanasopoulos, for your statement before we jump into the questions part of the evening.
Thank you, Marianna. First of all, thank you, George. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Marianna, for hosting us. Very happy, to be part of this talk today. And I will try to give a little bit more the optimistic and non-politic version of how I see things. I've been, my name is Dimitrios Athanasopoulos. I'm the founding partner of AXIA Ventures Group. We started our little journey back in 2008, and we focus primarily in Greece and the periphery Europe, with offices in New York as well. But for the most part, we've seen the very difficult years of Greece. And what I can say right now from our perspective, which purely, from an investment banking perspective and overlooking capital flowing into Greece, we've never seen in these last 12 years such an interest and such a huge change on the credibility that the country has. And I have to say that this is not built overnight. I think the current administration has been preparing and has been acting upon it, being ready and creating all the proper circumstances in order for this to flow. So from our perspective, what I see right now is not just in words, but in actual actions, is adapting the recommendation that Mr. Pissarides made through his paper, having people like Alex, which are people from the markets that goes in to become practical rather than political. And if we see the borrowing costs of the country, the demand for the Greek debt, the demand for Greek corporate debt, or everything else, it's remarkable what Greece has been able to do in such a very short time frame. So from my perspective, I see a lot of interesting things. I see a lot of professional people like myself considering for the first time ever in our lifetime to move back to Greece because of the tax incentives, because of the credibility, because of the environment, because of the ability to be able to create something. And I think this is very positive, and we should see a lot more going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Athanasopoulos. And I think these are the exact topics that we're going to try and focus on in today's discussion. The first question that I'd like to pose would be to Mr. Pissarides. Given your very deep understanding of the Greek economy's strengths and weaknesses at the moment, why should a foreign entity invest in Greece right now?
Okay, well, as I mentioned before, what Greece now most of all is investment in new technologies, in infrastructure, and so on. Greece currently invests 12% of its GDP. It's the lowest in Europe, and is so low that at best it can maintain its capital stock, cannot improve it. other countries with which it competes within the European single market invest something between 20 and 25%. The question, how do you get there? Well, domestically, there is no money. Banks are not in a condition to lend for investment as much as they want. Incomes have been low for the debt reasons before and for the low productivity that I mentioned. So it would be extremely difficult to find sources of investment domestically. And therefore, you turn to foreign direct investment that will go into equity. I mean, it's a no-brainer in a way, as the Americans like saying. Now, what you might say, though, is, sorry, let me backtrack a bit. There is no reason that Greece would more than welcome the foreign investment. The question is, why would someone who lives abroad want to invest in Greece? Because the country they live in is one obvious destination. There is what we call in economics home bias in investments. But in a way, the whole economy, the whole world economy is a destination. You know, why don't they invest in China instead of Greece, for example? You know? And the answer is that an investor is attracted partly by the rate of return on the investment, but it shouldn't be the only thing that attracts, and it's not, in fact. You know, that's what's known in the markets, which I'm sure both of you know much better than me because you work in the markets. It's the old Friedman doctrine that just maximize return, don't care about anything else. That's just false. You know, you go also for sustainability, for the environmental reasons, diversity reasons, engage more people in the population. And Greece really is in a position to give you that benefit. It signed up to all the environmental agreements, the sustainability goals of the United Nations and the Green Deal of the European Union. Actions are taken now to succeed there. Of course, it's slow down. It's not at the bottom of the European Union in that respect. Cyprus is at the bottom. Greece is just above. But I can tell you, Greece is doing a lot more than Cyprus to move up. That's why it's open. It has the environment. It has the sources, the environmental sources for sustainable investments. You know, it has the wind power, the solar power. I mean, in my view, it's incredible that Germany is the biggest user, I think, in Europe in solar power, and they put their photovoltaics within Germany, but it doesn't have sunshine. Why don't they come and install them in Greece and run cables to go to Germany? I mean, you know, investments in all these things are possible, and therefore, and of course, given the low base from which it is starting, you do have the prospect of a very good rate of return. There's only one direction it can go, if I put it mildly, and therefore, everything is ready in that environment. The country needs it desperately, and the investor is not doing it only for patriotic reasons, which are good enough, of course, for me. And I'm not saying that the Hellenic Initiative shouldn't take into account that they're Greeks helping their motherland. That's an honorable objective, but also the economic considerations that will attract investment are there.
Thank you. So the fundamentals seem to be there for the first time in many years. Over to you, Mr. Patelis. Would you agree? I assume you probably agree that the key conditions that must be on offer to make a country attractive from an FDI perspective are in place in Greece at the moment, right?
Correct. When this government came to power, its mandate was to slowly work on many different issues. I'm sort of responding indirectly to one of the questions that was posed. You know, should you help physical capital or human capital? And of course, the answer is both. And so the government had a multi-pronged approach. First up, there has been a notable fiscal shift away from government spending and towards tax cuts, particularly supporting salaried employment. The country, of course, was and continues to be does continue to have targets for its fiscal primary surpluses. However, the pandemic came along and created an opportunity to do a lot of structural changes. There has been a notable reduction in social security contributions for salaried employment, elimination of the so-called solidarity tax surcharge. We have tax incentives for people coming from abroad, pensioners, people who relocate their jobs. Dividend tax rate increase is now 5%. There's basically no capital gains tax. Secondarily, the government has worked, as I mentioned before, on reforms. We just passed a major piece of legislation, labor market reform, and there's another one coming up in July, which is pension reform. And there has been a lot of licensing simplification. As Professor Pissarides mentioned, a lot of emphasis on renewables and making sure that you have the structure in place to take advantage of them. And then, of course, you need infrastructure. And infrastructure comes in many forms these days. Digital infrastructure has been high up on the list. The creation of the Ministry for Digital Reform, which has been slowly digitizing everything. I would highlight the vaccination drive in Greece, for example, has been entirely digital. There has literally been no piece of paper involved at all. And the country's had a digital vaccination certificate from the beginning. Also, the 5G auction was completed end of last year, and the country already has over 50% coverage of 5G and a fund that's been set up to invest in 5G services. And then there's human capital. We have, through Greece 2.0 and elsewhere, a lot of projects to upskill and reskill the labor force. But also there's another bill in Parliament to reform university education and reform primary education as well, and also focus as well on the in-betweens, what would be called in the United States community colleges, or would be called technical education in other countries. So, and the banks, of course, very important bit. The banks were saddled with over half their loans as bad loans in 2019, and today they're on track to reduce bad loans to single digit by the end of 22. Today, Alpha Bank, one of the largest banks in Greece, just completed a successful 800 million capital raise at a very small discount to market price. So all in all, a lot of stuff going on, and we firmly believe that the country is now on a different path. Thank you.
It's a truly long list of measures that are very pro-business by any standard. So I'm guessing that has a very real effect, but also a very important signaling effect in the market. And I'll get to you, Mr. Athanasopoulos, and I'll ask you a slightly different question. Investor views on Greece, as we have all talked about already, have changed markedly over the past years. But do you feel there are still certain sticking points that investors mention when looking to invest in Greece?
I will address that. I just want to say on the issue of investments and the flow in Greece right now, there is a massive liquidity globally, and Greece today offers a very interesting investment destination based on the fact that it has a government that makes all these reforms, plus assets which are euro denominated on a hard currency, are quite attractive. So, the capital today is very mobile, can move easily from, jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And once Greece was able to put its good face forward, and the credibility of what the administration is doing, plus making all these reforms, which are practical around taxes, around incentives, around lower, labor costs for the businesses, better benefits for the employees, etc. People are looking at Greece quite differently. And again, it's not a theory, it's actual practice. As Alex mentioned, this year we had a massive flow of capital, which we have not seen in 12 years or so in Greece on practical matters. We're able to recapitalize two of the largest banks. We had the benefit of being part of both syndicates, with Piraeus Bank and Alpha Bank today, where basically offers came on a quite very large amount compared to what was asked. A lot of the very large corporates have raised corporate debt in very low rates compared to other European jurisdictions, where there was always a massive gap between Greece and other European countries. So I just want to say that, you know, we really actually see it. Now, what are the problems potentially? Obviously, Greece has very small size. So investors and very large investors that are looking to Greece, it's very hard for them to deploy large amounts of capital. Hopefully right now in the market, we are seeing some trends where basically certain sectors are being consolidated in order to create much larger companies that can potentially attract much larger capital. And actually, you know, in collaboration with some suggestion from Mr. Pissarides and also from the government and Alex, I think there have been a lot of incentives to help that consolidation aspect. We see, for example, you know, some of the world's largest private equity firms today coming to Greece and try to consolidate the private healthcare, the food sector, the hospitality, you know, the hospitality aspect. Now, other things that are quite important on the negative side that they need improvement are the corporate governance. Many companies in Greece are driven by families, and obviously, you know, we need to do more in order to improve the corporate governance, so institutional and international investors can feel easier accepting and investing in such companies where basically, you know, are managed properly and the capital is not a risk. I would say those are the two primary issues to focus on.
Thank you so much. I'd like to shift gear a little bit and focus on the labor market. What are Sir Christopher, what are the labor market conditions that you believe are essential for a country that is looking to attract FDI? And do you feel like the recent trends, the recent workplace trends, are creating a different picture for how investments interact with skills and training?
The labor market has many different aspects. You know, it's the way that legislation treats employers when they are creating jobs. It's the way labor workers are supported when they lose their jobs or when they're there, the way wages are negotiated, and of course skills, what skills they have. And for investment to succeed, the labor market has to be responsive to that kind of investment, as it were, across the board. If it's high-tech investment, then you need the highly skilled labor force that is going to work with it. You need the big company, as Mr. Athanasopoulos was saying, to manage it. And you need, of course, the infrastructure, and you need to give enough flexibility to the employer to create the jobs. Now, current technological trends, which are mainly digital and more technical in a way in nature, automation and artificial intelligence and so on, require even better trained labor force. And also, however big the companies, they require collaboration between pure research, usually done at universities, and research done at the level of the firm. I mean, you know, look at the successes of Silicon Valley, for example. If you didn't have Stanford and Berkeley right there and collaborate all the time, it wouldn't have been there. Look at MIT and the Boston corridor. We don't have that in Greece. But part of the reforms that Mr. Patelis was saying and things that we outline in great detail in our report are meant to encourage closer collaboration between universities and industry, with the government providing the environment for that investment. Now, perhaps not surprisingly, given what we know about labor markets, workers' organizations, and in Greece in particular, this part of reform is the one that met with greatest resistance from our proposals. You know, when we said you need bigger firms, you know, you need to break away from family relationships. So suddenly, you know, they want to destroy young entrepreneurs because they just want to have multinationals take over everything, blah, blah, which of course is completely incorrect. But anyway, that was it. When we say you need more flexibility because no employer and no investor would come and invest in a company if the owners, if the managers of that company do not have the flexibility to choose where they want to invest, to adapt, and so on. Flexibility is probably the word that is hated most by workers' organizations. So once you say flexibility, they say, oh, another neoliberal telling us the same things, you know. Whereas the most flexible countries in Europe are countries like Denmark and Netherlands, and they're also the most social democratic countries in Europe. I really don't understand why workers' unions don't see that. I mean, it's there in front of you. It's not some imaginative abstract concept. The idea is that if you have a flexible enough environment, there are better incentives for the worker work well to get promotions. Promotions take place on the basis of merit. Workers are more likely to own any reform and any training that they do because they know that the benefits will come directly to them. Now, what the objections sometimes are is that, oh, you know, if you have flexible, then a worker is at the mercy of the employer. He could be kicked out of work. He could be doing, incomes could be suppressed, which again is completely incorrect. I do support a good minimum wage to avoid any exploitation where you have, you know, things like fast food outlets, for example, you know, where you might claim that the people are not sufficiently educated to stand there on their own. But again, these criticisms don't realize is that a company, it depends on a good labor force to succeed. It would be stupid to throw out good workers it will make less profit if it does that. You know, job creation is an investment, and you want your investment to see your investment succeeding with a good worker. Now you might say, okay, some unemployment of course will arise. And another thing actually which is very important, a market that is not flexible will mainly hurt young people, because when a young worker goes in, he finds a wall there of established workers who got their jobs heaven knows when, and they sit there at the chair, they do nothing, they can't get in. If you want to encourage your young people to stay in your own country and succeed at work, then you do need to have the flexibility. Otherwise they leave and they go and work abroad, like we've been seeing over so many years. Yeah. Well, you might say, okay, you know, what happens to those who might lose their jobs for whatever reason? Well, that's where government comes in with social support. And therefore, you get, for the labor market to succeed, to attract investment, you also need a good social state. That's why I said the countries that are the most successful in that respect are also the most social democratic countries in Europe, because they have this strong social support. So when you look at the labor market, you don't just say, oh, you know, you need to have a good investment environment, good entrepreneurs, good skills, and that's all you need. No, in order to succeed, you need to have a good social support program. You know, look at the one that Denmark has, or the Netherlands, or Sweden, and so on. You need to have good universities to collaborate in the new technologies. And that, again, Sweden is the most successful country in Europe in that respect. Mm-hmm. Just outside Europe, Israel is extremely successful in that respect. Again, a country the size of Greece and our neighbor. You need to have the skills, not only the collaboration and technology, but the training and the upskilling all the time. And all these things come together to give you a labor market that will attract the investment and will utilize the investment.
Yeah. Thank you. And this is a very big picture view, and you mentioned some very harmful misperceptions that are still very much here, and we need to address. I'd like to focus a little bit more on the skill sets that we expect to be in great need in the next few years. Mr. Patelis, again, from a labor market perspective, do you think we're in a position to satisfy increasing FDI needs over the coming years, especially when it comes to more specific skill sets, for example, in technological fields, but also middle and high-level management positions, which are often seen as key?
Thank you. I mean, the short answer to your question is for sure, and the long answer follows. Greece differs from many other countries in many ways, but one way in which it differs is that it has ample spare labor capacity. And if you compare the Greek economic cycle to the rest of the world, Greece did not go through an economic boom in the 2010s, and as a result is starting with 16% unemployment and 500,000 Greeks who left the country alone during the crisis years. So we're at a very different stage of the economic cycle than other countries, for example, the United States, with unemployment rate down to 6%, and parts of Europe too, with very large shortages in the labor market. Greece has ample labor market. I should also add there's still significant labor supply to come from expanding the workforce towards greater female labor market participation and more youth participation. And the government has done a lot of work to tackle both issues. On the female side, the labor market bill that was passed a month ago not only added extra flexibility as per what Professor Pissarides mentioned, but also dealt with work-life balance and improving the situation of young mothers in Greece. But to go back to your question, you know, the proof is in the pudding. If you look at, for example, some of the recent investments in Greece, we have Pfizer, the US multinational, opened a digital hub in Thessaloniki, the second city in the north of Greece. And what they found was that they originally had openings for about 250 professionals, and they were so inundated and swamped with resumes. Actually, a quarter of the resumes came from outside Greece, that they are now on track to hire a total of 1,200 people in both digital and services hub. I'll give you another very random example that's sort of stuck in my mind. There's another company called Orpheum, O-R-F-I-U-M, which is a digital rights music management company, which basically takes clips from YouTube or TikTok or what have you and assigns royalties to the music creators. And this company has its offices in LA in the United States and in Athens, Greece, and is on track to increase its employment and its workforce in Athens from, if I'm not mistaken, 250 at the moment to maybe 1,000 or so. So I would actually argue that your question is the exact opposite. Greece has too much talent. We've seen that in other examples, at least when it comes to better educated and high level people. But I want to, if I may, address, or maybe we'll do it at the next round. I want to address some of the questions afterwards. So over to you, Marianna. Okay. Maybe we can talk about these afterwards. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll try and keep a little bit of time, quite a bit of time at the end to address as many of these as we can. So let's try and I'll try and keep the questions short and perhaps the answers short as well, so we can get to that portion of the event. Now, Mr. Athanasopoulos, again, leaving labor market conditions a little bit behind, and since Mr. Patelis mentioned the investment by Pfizer in Thessaloniki, from your experience, do foreign investors need to be actively courted, or do they readily flock to an investment destination when the conditions are ripe and once it becomes established as an attractive destination?
I want to make a few quick comments on the labor, very few, and say, you know, besides Pfizer, we had Microsoft, TeamViewer, Volkswagen, a lot of multinationals for the first time make significant investments in Greece, driven primarily by the talent pool. So I would agree with Alex on this point that Greece has tremendous human capital that is not properly appreciated and not properly rewarded. Once you create the proper circumstances in order for people to be appreciated, to be rewarded correctly, there is tremendous power within Greece, but also, from the brain drain we had the past decade, there is a huge amount of Greeks that are really considering to come back. From my experience, for example, in the past 12 months, we repatriated three actually very senior bankers from London that came back to Greece and back to Athens to work and being able, to compete in an environment vis-a-vis, London or Frankfurt or New York. So what I want to say is that the talent pool that Greece has is tremendous, needs to be better appreciated and better rewarded. And if we do that combinedly as government, as private enterprise, we will create that force that will produce those results, as Mr. Pissarides said. So as far as investors, obviously, investors, as you mentioned on your opening statement, from your investment banking years, Greece at some point was non-investable, right? So the amount of attention and education that was needed in the past was really big. And we did a lot of that because we had no options, right? We were dedicated on Greece and we had to make it work. And in this past decade, we've been responsible for close to 40 billion euro of investment within Greece as an investment bank. And what I can tell you, right now, things are much easier. You don't need to explain things that are straightforward vis-a-vis, what the government is doing, what is the political stability, what is the cost of capital, having, the rates decreasing. Obviously, still Greece, like every other jurisdiction, has a lot of peculiarities. So investors definitely need, attention and guidance. But I think there is a lot of competent people and institutions within Greece and outside of Greece that they play a major role lately. There is a very interesting force right now, and many people from a global perspective, all the global banks right now that compete have refocused on Greece. So we see all the big London-based, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and everybody else putting a huge new effort in Greece. And that's because, investors are interested and transactions are happening. So everything is coming back, I think, after a lost decade. And it's extremely exciting to see in action.
Absolutely, and that's why it's such an important time to be talking about all of these issues. This idea of brains coming back, of capital coming back. One of the questions that I see our audience has posed has to do with the better synergies and connections with academic institutions, especially foreign ones. And since this is a THI event, connecting to foreign academic institutions and tapping into the power of the Greek diaspora is something that's very important. I wonder, would you like to touch upon that a little bit more? I don't know, Mr. Patelis, if you'd like to add something to that, or Mr. Pissarides.
I myself lived in the United States for 7 years and in the UK for 11 years. So I'm sort of part of the diaspora and then I'm not. I completely understand the power of the diaspora, and it is very true that this is the secret weapon that Greece has. It's very important, I would say, not just for the universities, but also for companies in general, because as you know, particularly with large companies, there's no such thing as a company. Each company has many different departments within it. It's very important that we utilize our diaspora to drive investment into the country, and everybody can chip in and do their bit by working from within their company and letting us know how we can attract that company investment. The same goes for universities. What I will say is that in Greece 2.0, we do have projects that involve better relationship between the universities and Greek industry, and as you mentioned before, this is a very important issue for economic growth. I want to address very quickly some of the questions. And when I say very quickly, I mean very quickly. Is there a plan to conduct a market review of Greece and provide the sectors that pose the hottest spaces of investment? The answer is no. We believe in free markets. We do not believe that it's the role of the government to pick sectors and decide which ones will be important. And I gave you the example of digital rights music management before, because this is the kind of thing that you'd never think would be a comparative advantage of Greece, but it turns out it was. There's a question about public-private partnerships. Greece 2.0 has a lot of public-private partnerships. PPP is the way to go. And actually, it's not true that it's not functional in Greece. There have been a number of PPPs, but there's going to be a lot more now. This will be particularly important both in the green and the digital revolutions, which are going to be very important for Greece as well. Should Greece focus on acquiring funding to revive and improve the heavy industry, or should the country direct most of the funding to the services sector? I think I answer the same answer, that we don't believe in picking one or the other.
I wonder if we could also get Mr. Pissarides' view on this sector picking question, which seems to come up a lot. And from my understanding of the Pissarides review of the Greek economy, that's not something you did. You went for a much broader reform approach. Is that correct?
Yes, in fact, I agree entirely with what Mr. Patelis said, in that in a free market, which it's not. I mean, in a sense, he said, the government, or he said, we believe in free markets. I don't think we have a choice, actually, within the European Union. Once we decided to be part of the single European market, we have to believe in free markets. That's what the European Union is. If we don't like it, then all right, get out and then start and become Soviet Union or whatever. But once we are there, that's what it is. And I don't think any government department, wherever, or any government is able to select sectors that will be the champions of the future. They just don't have the information. The information is available at the marketplace, and best people to process that information are the participants in the marketplace, not someone who sits behind some ivory tower, they say about universities, but maybe the government is not even ivory.
Actually, if I may add one very quick comment, because I think this is a very interesting one, particularly for the US audience, because we get this a lot. What is little known in the United States is the European Union has what's called a no state aid rule. That means that it's forbidden for governments to subsidize private enterprises. It's a very strict framework, and one that ensures a level playing field amongst smaller and larger countries. Basically, this means that the Greek government is not allowed to subsidize a private enterprise, and subsidy takes many forms, either direct injection or indirect injection. And actually, the level of competition ends up being much higher. Thank you.
In fact, the same goes with particular companies. The government cannot select state companies and subsidize them. They get fined by the European Union and they close down. It's what happened with Cyprus Airways, for example. The government was subsidizing, European Union said stop, they wouldn't stop, they got fined, they closed it, gone. So it's not up to the government to decide things like that, and the sectors of the economy that in the end will grow more are the ones where the country has a comparative advantage. There is no doubt that it has a comparative advantage in tourism, for example, because of the climate and the historic history that it has. But it doesn't mean that the government will say, oh, invest in tourism, we're going to promote tourism. It will be promoted on its own. There's no doubt that there are all those islands that offer themselves in that sector, and so on and so forth. Now, and the same goes with heavy industry. I mean, if you ask me if I were an entrepreneur, I wouldn't go into heavy industry. It's not where Greece has a comparative advantage. Leave that to the Germans and maybe the Italians and French, but not Greece. With universities, though, I'd like to make one comment with universities. I mean, I'd be interested to see if Alex has a response to that. I suspect he would. the thing that holds back universities in Greece is the political influence that there is on universities. It's incredible how many things you have to get permission from the Department of Education to do it, which to someone abroad, I mean, either Britain, but especially the United States, if they hear what things Greek universities have to apply for permission before they can implement them, they'd be shocked. I mean, imagine if Harvard and MIT have to apply to the State Department for Education before they can appoint someone, for example, you know, that kind of thing, or give pay rise. And it's incredible that that a country would trust civil servants to be better judges of what's good for a university than the university professors themselves. It's really beyond me. Mm-hmm. Before you can give independence to universities, you cannot see them flourishing. You cannot see them cooperating with industry or doing the wonderful things that they're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And that's where we have to start. And we have proposals for that. I don't know if Mr. Patelis wants to add something about that.
Marianna, if you want me to give some ideas on the sectors, because obviously I'm not government and I'm not, I can give some. Since
you're a market participant, so you can.
So the market participant, there is huge interest right now on energy and green energy and everything that is happening in Greece. It's quite amazing to see between public companies, but private companies as well. There is a very large turn towards new technologies, green energy, and the ability to develop and completely transform the means of production in Greece. And we see a big capital flow towards that specific sector. In addition, there is a lot of infrastructure appetite. As I said, on infrastructure, what is interesting is the size of the tickets are much larger and much more appropriate for very large institutions. There are very successful programs. I would agree with Alex on the PPP front. You can see, you know, what happened with the airport and some other things that, you know, they have done really well, performing well, deploying capital correctly, being efficient, producing profits for the private as well as the government. And I think right now, since we had 12 years of very little public investment, there is a big release of a lot of infrastructure projects between highways, ports, that actually have changed hands, and they have gone out from a very, let's call it, stuck environment to be able, you know, to receive capital and completely reform the infrastructure of Greece. A great example is what happened with the 14 regional airports, where, you know, a big German company together with a Greek family participated. They won that, you know, that auction, and they have now completed the renovation of 14 airports across Greece, which attracts a huge amount of interest, increased tourism, better infrastructure, and those are the things that, you know, people really want to see. As another sector at the end, I will say also, you know, the banking sector right now and everything, you know, Greece, because of the crisis, had one of the largest NPL, you know, markets in Europe. Without tackling the issue of NPL, which this government has done very well, you cannot unlock the economy. Right now, we had a massive amount of non-performing loans changing hands, and being able to also have the framework, the legal framework, in order to reorganize, in order to go through a Chapter 11 type of process, and to restart companies that they were completely stagnant and stuck for decades in Greece. So right now, we are kind of in an inflection point. And those, you know, three sectors, including tourism, I think are four sectors that will take a lot of attention, a lot of money, and a lot of opportunity.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting that you mentioned the legal aspect of the financial sector and the reforms that we've seen in this front. And I noticed that some of the questions had to do with the legal framework around investments, and whether foreign investors, especially that are not so acquainted with the Greek environment, can feel safe enough to invest in the country. I was wondering if you'd like to address that, Mr. Patelis, as we're running out of time. And another big question, and I wonder if you'd all like to pitch in answering that, is how can investors, FDI is a long-term game, and some investors might feel that, yes, we do have a pro-business government at the moment, but to what extent can they trust that this is the course that the country has chosen for, let's not say the long run, but at least the medium run? And with these two questions, I'd like to probably bring this to a close. Mr. Patelis?
Thank you very much. On your second question, it's a very interesting one. And actually, Greece has been, believe it or not, a leader in many political trends globally. We were one of the first countries to go through political fragmentation, a phenomenon where a lot of new parties appeared, and one of the first to get out of it with the election and a single majority party in parliament. We have a very the governing party now has about 40% popularity in the polls, which is unheard of in many other countries. And was also populism. Greece went through populism and went full circle. And I should say that if you look at the opinion polls and the way in which people respond to various questions and the way they put priorities, you will see that things have changed considerably. And therefore, in my opinion, the political risk is actually, not only is there no political risk in Greece, I actually strongly believe that it's an advantage that the country has, that its political system has matured a lot further than in other parts of the world and is a lot further ahead in the process. In terms of foreign investment in Greece, I mean, look, any country you invest in, you need to know the locals. It's just how it is. Believe me, the United States is a very bureaucratic country if you don't know how it works. So there have been very many successful investments here. I think Dimitris mentioned a great example. Fraport, the German company, took over many of the regional airports, and they recently reopened, refurbished, and ready to accept many tourists. So there will be a lot of investments in both green and digital. It's a big priority of the whole planet, not just of Greece. And I want to close today's comments by thanking everybody for the invitation and reaching out and saying, if we can help you with anything to draw investments in the country, please reach out, send us a note, and we'll be very happy to accommodate your requests. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patelis. Sir Christopher, do you have any parting thoughts?
Well, no, I should add that I agree entirely that the country is a very good destination for investment. I mean, they mentioned bureaucratic considerations and all of that. I agree that in every country, if you have a foreign investment, you have to go through certain procedures. Obviously, the fewer they are that succeed in securing the investment, avoid money laundering, fraud, and all that. And unfortunately, there are a lot of fraudsters in the world that will do it. I mean, the issue that we focused in our reporting that very strongly are the long delays in the courts reaching decisions, or any government department reaching decisions. Investment is an ongoing dynamic process. If you need to apply something, or if there's a dispute that you want to resolve, and then you have to sit there unable to do anything because the years pass and there is a long queue and they tell you it's not your turn yet, and so on and so forth. It's not good. Once you have that decisions can be made within reasonable time, I think everything else will fall into place in Greece. And as I was saying, there is an environment that is very welcome to investment, both in terms of rate of return and in terms of achieving current objectives with environmental sustainability, diversity, engagement of more demographic groups into productive life, young people, older people, especially women across gender, race, and so on. Greece has all those things in place, the structure for those to succeed. And as Mr. Patelis mentioned, the political environment is stable and welcoming to that kind of investment. So why not? I mean, I invested my time gratis in the report, so those who have other things to invest, they're welcome. All I have is my time.
That's a very hopeful and optimistic note to end on. Mr. Athanasopoulos, would you like to add something more?
Sure. Thanks so much. What I would say is I would actually address the diaspora, because I think everybody can help. And being, part of the diaspora, I've been in New York for 25 years. I think that everybody right now should look to have a connectivity to Greece, either through investment, either through applying for a Greek passport, either, traveling there, either, having a business where they can make a connectivity between Greece and wherever they are, about exports, about transfer of technology, there's so many small or bigger things that everybody can do. I think it's a unique time. You will definitely feel welcome in Greece right now. Actually, Peter can say a few comments because he did that. And I think that everybody can help. It's a phenomenal time for Greece. I think we do have Greece 2.0, and we should all, be part of it.
Thankfully, there are more ways than ever to stay connected to Greece and to contribute. I don't know if, Peter, you'd like to share a few words in closing.
Yeah, just what Dimitri said just now is that I like to tell people that, my great-grandparents left Greece in the 1890s for America because that was the land of opportunity. And I came back to Greece because this is the new land of opportunity. And I think that this discussion today, everything that Mr. Pissarides, Mr. Patelis, and Mr. Athanasopoulos had to say today proved that, all the signs are there. So thank you. I mean, this was an enlightening and informational and obviously very motivating discussion. I think I'd like to thank everyone on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Hellenic Initiative and all of our thousands of supporters from around the world who support our work, and thank all of you who made this event possible today. A very big thank you to our friend Dimitrios Athanasopoulos from AXIA Ventures, who's been with us from day one, as George mentioned earlier, and who's championed all of our causes and given of his time and his pocketbook. And of course, this event would have happened without him. And I think the entire country and millions of Greeks in the diaspora owed a huge debt of gratitude to Sir Christopher Pissarides and Mr. Alex Patelis for making the new Greece 2.0 a reality. And obviously Marianna, another great friend of THI, and I can't imagine a more adept moderator that anyone could hope for. Thank you again for your time, your generosity, and your professionalism. Finally, I'd also like to thank our extremely dedicated team, THI team, Michael Printzos, Maria Papastathi, Artemis Kohas, Tsini Kouvelli, Tina Korpas, Dean Seivigos, Nick Tzimanaikis, and Athina Kokinaikis, all Greeks, by the way, if you hadn't noticed. I'd like to thank all of them for, since the pandemic happened, everyone's been working overtime. Last year was our most successful year ever at THI, and this year is going to be even more successful than last year. If everyone who's watching hasn't already done so, and by the way, this was our most successful digital speaker series event yet. Thank you all. For those of you who haven't done so already, you can visit our website at thehellenicinitiative.org to sign up for our newsletter. But please mark your calendars for September 30th for our London Gala and December 4th for our New York Gala this year. And Marianna, back over to you.
Thank you, Peter. I think this discussion will be an ongoing one in many, many ways. Thank you to all our panelists. It was a pleasure moderating this discussion. A big thank you to the Hellenic Initiative and, of course, to our audience for tuning in. Have a good evening from heat-struck Athens, and hopefully we'll all stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.